Hi, come on in. Sit down. I want to talk about stress this week. Some people are predisposed to stress. In other words, they perceive events to be more stressful than other people who would be more resilient in response to the same event. So there's individual differences as a factor in determining our levels of stress. Also, research shows that gender is also a factor, that women typically experience more stress than men and experience 2 times the rate of depression as men. Life experience is a factor. If a person had a very stressful early childhood upbringing, they may have a tendency to interpret events as more stressful as adults as well. AMOD lists some common non-work sources of stress, and these are probably no surprise. As you can see, relationships, and then marriage and divorce as part of relationships, certainly personal health issues, financial issues, which has really been big since 2008, and raising children. Some common sources of stress for working adults by AMOD: organizational change, and organizational changes become ongoing today. Job security, which is probably the worst it's ever been in the history of our country, due to practices in outsourcing and downsizing. Balancing family work demands. A lot of organizations talk work-family balance but don't practice it. Job relocation, which is spreading families out. Once again, financial problems, paying bills. Increasing job demands, and I would say job enlargement. Boring or absence of challenging work. Pay inequity that was in the news this week. Women still, on average, earn 77 cents to the dollar compared to men. Going to school and working full-time, does that sound familiar? Also planning for retirement. All of these are sources of stress. The most common sources that I hear today: financial problems, and say once again, since 2008, that seems to be the top of the list. And then along with that, real estate value, because so many homes went underwater after 2008. Job enlargement, because organizations, they outsource and they downsize, and then they just add the work to the existing people, and so it becomes these highly stressed, overwhelming jobs. Absence of job security. Another trend today is for organizations to lay off the older workers. When a person hits 50, their job becomes a threat because they're the highest paid employees. The cost of living seems to be increasing. Retirement security, and once again, employment's one of the worst it's been in years. I want to talk a little bit about some cognitive patterns which contribute to stress, and these were identified by Thomas and Timon. They have a really nice instrument called the Stress and Resiliency Profile, where you can actually measure these. It's available through CPP, which is in the references. But these 3 cognitive patterns they identify as number 1, deficiency focusing. And this is a tendency where a person in any given situation, the person, they only think of the negatives in the situation, and then that results in stress. Necessitating is a tendency thinking of tasks as being imperative to be done. As, for example, like I have to do this, I must do this. and so it puts this pressure on themselves. And then it says skill recognition. Actually, it's lack of skill recognition. It's failure to realize how how a person's own knowledge and skills can contribute to an outcome. And what they do as a tendency, they tend to attribute it to luck instead. Did I get the right one? Yeah, there we go. So the cognitive patterns, some people are more predisposed to stress, while others seem to be more resilient. It's almost like the type A, type B personality theory explains. The good news is cognitive patterns are learned behaviors, and you can learn to change them. And Deepak Chopra says that if you do something for 21 days, you begin to form a habit. So that seems to be the key. In changing cognitive patterns, the first thing you have to do, you have to become aware of which ones you're doing that result in stress. And then you have to practice asking yourself a balancing question. And that's what you have to do for 21 days in order to integrate it into your behavior. So if you're prone to deficiency focusing, in other words, you're only thinking of the negatives, what you want to do is you want to ask yourself in each situation when you're doing that, you want to ask yourself, okay, now what were the positives? And when you do that, it tends to present a more balanced picture of the situation, reducing your stress. If you're prone to necessitating, where you're saying to yourself all the time, I have to, I must, what you need to do is begin to think of, in reality, if I didn't do this, what would really happen? And sometimes you'd say, well, I don't want to accept those consequences, therefore I'm going to do it. But when you think of it in that way, it becomes more of a choice. It's like, I don't have to do this, but I'm choosing to do this right now because I don't want to experience negative consequences. And in other cases, you may find that really nothing happens if you don't do it. You could do it tomorrow and you'd still be okay. It's just all in your mind. And then on the last one, with your own skills, what you have to do in each situation, you have to be mindful. You have to bring to your awareness that you have knowledge and skills that you bring to a situation. And so sometimes the reason you're are successful is because of your knowledge and skills that you were able to deploy in the situation. In other words, you were the factor. So you need to give yourself credit where credit is due and not attribute everything to luck, because if you attribute it to luck, then you basically you're saying, hey, I have no control here, and that's not the case. Stress and well-being are becoming popular topics today, and I think that's because there's so many work environments in particular that are characterized as being high-stress work environments. Tom Rath of the Gallup organization, he wrote a book in 2010 on well-being, and I have his book in the reference section, but that also helped to bring a focus to well-being to organizations. And there's the Yerke-Dodson model that basically says that stress enhances performance, but only to a point. It's the distribution. If you plotted the distribution, it looks like an inverted U or an upside down U, and it shows that performance increases, but then as you continue to experience stress or prolonged stress, then performance begins to decrease. And and I think we saw this in the recent Olympics in Sochi, Russia, that there seemed to be quite a few factors that were stressful for athletes. Besides the normal stress of competition, there were weather-related problems that affected the snow there. There was also the ongoing threat of terrorism that kind of hung over the entire event. And then there was also the Sochi area had a lot of buildings that were still in a state of construction, so that places where people stayed weren't necessarily ready. And I think this added stress caused some of the U.S. athletes that were expected to medal but did not. I think this was a factor. It just added too much stress, so their performance decreased. We're also seeing that job demands and job control, this is a factor contributing in organizations. In other words, as job demands increase and job control decreases, then stress goes up. Another one that fits for our subject matter quite well is what's called the person-environment fit. And the better that person-environment fit is, and the lower the level of work-related stress, and conversely, the worse the fit, the higher the stress. And so that's something that organizations can do that can also aid in placing people. All right, for the first discussion question for week 2, watch the video on stress in your body, and then answer the questions: what impact does stress have on the human body, and how can stress be managed? So I'm looking, in this lecture I talked about cognitive patterns, and certainly that's one way that stress could be managed, but there's a lot of other ways. For example, as exercise is very, very healthy on the list. Meditation or yoga, meditation and yoga are both becoming more popular. For example, Time magazine, in February, the issue of February 3, on the cover page had mindfulness, which is an excellent way to manage stress. I've posted a transcript of this lecture along with these references, and here you see I've got these 3, and there's the Rath book on well-being, and the instrument from Thomas and Time. Thank you.